The story of Jim Jones and the People's Temple is one of the most infamous chapters in modern religious and political and world history. It is remembered not merely as the tale of a charismatic preacher and his followers, but as a chilling, cautionary example of the dangers of unchecked authority and the seductive lure of utopian promises. 918 members, including more than 200 children of the People's Temple, died in the Jonestown tragedy of November 18, 1978. The images of the compound following the massacre from overhead were more than many could bear, and no one could forget. The world was forced to confront difficult situations and difficult questions about faith, power, and the human search for belonging. We're going to examine the origins of Jones's ministry, the growth of his movement through the mid-20th century, the socio-political environment that allowed it to flourish, and the slow unraveling that unfortunately culminated in this mass tragedy. In doing so, it also considers the legacy of Jonestown and the enduring lessons it offers about leadership, manipulation, and vulnerability in human communities. Welcome back, creeps. I'm your host, Noelle, the weirdo Wisconsinite of Creepy Confidential. I open case files on cryptids, cults, conspiracies, and other worldly creepy. I suggest you grab a cup of your favorite creepy beverage and join me on today's journey into the strange and obscure. I call this episode The People's Temple and the Rise and Fall of Jonestown. James Warren Jones was born on May 13, 1931 in Crete, Indiana, into a working-class family during the Great Depression. His father, James Thurman Jones, was a disabled World War I veteran, while his mother, Lynetta Putnam Jones, was known for her fierce independence and unorthodox ideas. The family lived in relative poverty, which exposed Jones from an early age to hardship and social marginalization. From childhood, Jones displayed traits that foreshadowed his future. He was precocious, often fascinated by religion, and prone to intense, sometimes unsettling behavior. Neighbors and acquaintances recall that he would preach to other children, conduct mock funerals for small animals and roadkill, and show an obsession with death and salvation. The combination of charisma, authority, and a fixation on ultimate meaning gave him the foundation of a future preacher's persona. As a teenager, Jones gravitated toward the Pentecostal and holiness churches, where the emotional fervor of worship and the emphasis on healing, prophecy, and inclusivity resonated with him. He was especially drawn to churches that practiced racial integration, an unusual feature in the very segregated Midwest of the 1940s. These experiences helped shape Jones's lifelong message of racial equality and social justice, even as his methods of achieving those goals grew increasingly authoritarian. In the early 1950s, Jim Jones became an ordained minister in the Independent Assemblies of God. He soon founded his own congregation in Indianapolis, which he called the, quote, Wings of Deliverance. This church later evolved into the People's Temple Full Gospel Church. From the outset, Jones promoted a message that combined Pentecostal enthusiasm with progressive social values. He emphasized racial integration, communal living, and service to the poor, positioning the temple as both a religious and social movement. The 1950s and 60s were a time of significant racial tension in America. Jones capitalized on this climate by making racial equality a central pillar of his message. He recruited members across racial lines, creating one of the few genuinely integrated churches of the time. The People's Temple offered food, health care, housing assistance, and job placement for those in need. For many African American families, especially in Indianapolis, Jones represented not only a spiritual leader, but also a practical ally in the struggle of dignity and survival. By the early 1960s, Jones had built a devoted congregation, and yet he was restless. Convinced that nuclear war was imminent and influenced by apocalyptic literature, he sought a quote-unquote safe zone for his followers. In 1965, he moved much of the temple's membership to Northern California, first settling in Ukiah. This marked the beginning of the temple's westward expansion, where it would grow exponentially in numbers. California in the late 60s and early 70s provided fertile ground for new religious movements. Amid countercultural experimentation, civil rights activism, and disillusionment with mainstream institutions, groups that promised community, equality, and meaning found eager audiences. Jones positioned the People's Temple as a radical alternative to both traditional churches and political institutions. In San Francisco and Los Angeles, the temple grew rapidly, and by the mid-70s, membership swelled to the thousands. The organization owned buses, properties, and businesses operating with a degree of efficiency that impressed outsiders. Temple services blended these fiery preaching, gospel music, communal solidarity, and these staged healings where Jones claimed to cure cancer or summon divine visions. Politically, Jones became a power player in San Francisco. He cultivated relationships with prominent politicians, including Harvey Milk and even the First Lady, Rosalind Carter. The temple's ability to mobilize hundreds of members for rallies, protests, and political campaigns made it an attractive ally. In 1976, Jones was appointed to the San Francisco Housing Authority, the city's largest landlord. His blend of religious authority and political clout gave him an aura of invincibility. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Reports began to emerge of abuse, coercion, financial exploitation, and staged miracles. Defectors claimed that Jones demanded absolute loyalty, punished dissenters, and orchestrated elaborate deceptions to maintain his grip on his followers. The tension between the temple's public image as a force for good and its internal climate of fear foreshadowed darker turns to come. By the mid-1970s, Jim Jones faced mounting scrutiny. Journalists and ex-members accused him of abuse, manipulation, and cult-like behavior. In response, Jones sought to shield his movement from outside interference. His solution? To create a utopian commune in Guyana, South America. In 1974, the People's Temple leased land in the remote jungle of Guyana, near the Venezuelan border. The settlement was named Jonestown. Jones promoted it as a socialist paradise, free from racism, capitalism, and government oppression. By 1977, facing increasing media pressure in the United States, Jones relocated with more than 1,000 followers to Jonestown. At first, Jonestown was depicted as a thriving agricultural experiment. Visitors saw members working cooperatively, schools teaching children, and a spirit of unity. The Guyanese government, which welcomed Jones as a counterbalance to U.S. influence, praised the project. However, the reality for many temple members was harsher. Life in Jonestown was grueling. The land was difficult to cultivate, food was scarce, and living conditions were primitive at best. Members worked long hours in the heat and were subjected to frequent, quote, white nights, drills in which Jones tested their loyalty by simulating mass suicide scenarios. Increasingly paranoid, Jones isolated his followers, restricted their communications with outsiders, and used fear to maintain control. His health was deteriorating, and his dependence on drugs intensified his erratic behavior. The turning point came between 1977 and 78 when concerned relatives and journalists began investigating Jonestown. Defectors' testimonies of abuse, imprisonment, and coercion alarmed U.S. officials. In November of 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan of California led a delegation to Guyana to assess conditions on a first-hand basis. Initially, Ryan and his group were treated cordially, but during their visit, several temple members asked to leave, exposing the cracks in Jones's narrative of a harmonious community. On November 18th, as Ryan's group prepared to depart from a nearby airstrip, armed temple members ambushed them. Congressman Ryan, 3 journalists, and 1 defector were killed, and others were wounded. Back in Jonestown, Jones declared that the end had come. Framing the situation as a revolutionary act, he told his followers that they must commit revolutionary suicide rather than be destroyed by outsiders. One thing I haven't mentioned until now is that Jones really liked to record himself all the time. It was one of those, the speakers was always on, he always had a microphone, and he was always talking, and while he preached for, hours and hours, but the day this all came to a head, it was recorded. So stay till the end, and I will share some of that recorded audio. I warn you, though, it is not easy to listen to. Just keep in mind what's happening. There are men, women, and children, and you hear various things happening. So just as a warning if you've made it so far, but I would like to share that. In the hours that followed after Jones announced that it was time, over 900 people, men, women, and children, like I mentioned, died by ingesting or being injected by a cyanide-laced drink, or a flavor aid specifically drink. Those who resisted were forced or injected, and children and babies were among the first to die. The Jonestown massacre shocked the world, and still to this day shocks the world. Graphic images of hundreds of bodies lying in row after row and layer after layer in the hot Guyanese jungle circulated globally, cementing Jonestown as a symbol of tragedy and fanaticism. There's a phrase I'm sure you all have heard, drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Though a misnomer, the drink was actually called Flavor Aid. This entered popular culture as shorthand from this moment for shorthand for blind obedience. That's when you say, "Oh, you're drinking the Kool-Aid." That's where that phrase comes from, if you weren't aware. So almost 50 years later, and that phrase still circles around popular culture. Now, investigations that followed revealed a complex portrait. Some scholars argued that many temple members sincerely believed in Jones's vision and were trapped by loyalty, fear, and isolation. Others emphasized the cultic manipulation the psychological control and abuse that made resistance nearly impossible. Regardless of interpretation, the scale of the tragedy forced a reckoning about the nature of new religious movements, the responsibilities of governments, and the vulnerabilities of human faith. The legacy of Jim Jones and the People's Temple is multifaceted. For many, Jonestown remains a warning about the dangers of charismatic leadership and the promise of utopia. Scholars of religion and psychology have studied the case extensively, seeking to understand how ordinary people could be led to such extremes. Politically, the People's Temple remains an example of how religious groups can wield power in civic life for both good and bad. The temple's early emphasis on racial integration and social justice should not be overlooked, even though its collapse was catastrophic, for lack of a better word. For survivors and relatives, the tragedy is not simply a parable of blind faith, but a deeply personal story of loss, loved ones, and shattered communities. The rise and fall of Jim Jones and the People's Temple encapsulate the paradox of human idealism and vulnerability. What began as a movement rooted in equality, justice, and community ultimately descended into fear, paranoia, and mass death. Jones's journey from charismatic preacher to authoritarian cult leader illustrates the corrosive effects of unchecked power and the dangers of conflating spiritual authority with absolute control. The Jonestown tragedy of 1978 remains one of the darkest moments in modern history. Yet it also serves as a reminder of the need for vigilance against manipulation, against blind loyalty, and against the exploitation of humanity's deepest yearnings for belonging and purpose. Thanks for joining me for today's episode, The People's Temple and the Rise and Fall of Jonestown. Please take a moment to leave a review and give us a follow. We don't want you to miss out on any new episodes or releases. For more creepy content, visit creepyconfidential.com and stay creepy, my friends, and I'll catch you next time right here on Creepy Confidential.
You got to move. Are you going to get the medication here? You got to move. Marston is at 40 minutes.
You have to move, and the people that are standing there in the aisle go stay in the radio room yard, but everybody get behind the table and back this way, okay? There's nothing to worry about. Everybody keep calm and try and keep your children calm. And the older children can help love the little children and reassure them. Aren't crying from pain. It's just a little bitter tasting, but they're not crying out of any pain. Annie McGowan, can I please see you back?
Things I used to do before I came here. So let me tell you about it. It might make a lot of you feel a little more comfortable. Sit down and be quiet, please. One of the things that I used to do, I used to be a therapist. And the kind of therapy that I did had to do with reincarnation and past life situations. And every time anybody had the experience of going into a past life, I was fortunate enough through Father to be able to let them experience it all the way through their death, so to speak. And everybody was so happy when they made that step to the other side.
When you step, there's no other thing you can do but step that way. It's the only way to step. The choice is not ours now. It's out of our hands.
If you have a body that's been crippled, suddenly you have the kind of body that you want to have.
A little rest.
It feels good. You've never felt so good, family, I tell you. You've never felt so good is how that feels.
I do hope that those attorneys will stay where they belong and don't come up here. What is it? What is it? Get what? It's hard. It's hard. Only at first. Only at first is it hard. It's hard only at first. Living, you're looking at death. It only looks. Living is much, much more difficult. Raising up every morning and not knowing what's going to be the night's bringing. It's much more difficult. It's much more difficult.